All right, so if you haven't seen the last couple reviews that I've been in for the Nebula or the Zero Mercy Solid, the new 2.0, so on and so forth, I'm tentatively back to bowling righty again, so I thought I'd sit down and kind of explain that. Not permanently, not full time, just adding it back into the rotation. And once again, there's a podcast kind of video. I will have a couple things for you to watch, but I'll call those out when I get there. Otherwise, you can just listen. Now, to hit this real quick, too, I've had a handful of people comment that they don't like the whole watching me reading from a script thing, but I've got ADD. So if I speak from the heart, I'm just going to ramble for 45 minutes, repeat myself 8 times, and then end up not talking about 75% of what I wanted to talk about. So I have to sit down, collect my thoughts, write everything down, and organize it so that I can say what I want to say, how I want to say it. There's a lot of podcasts that do stuff like this too. People write speeches or presentations and everything else. So this is just, it is what it is. Sorry if it's not your cup of tea. So anyway, back to Righty. It's not pretty, though it does look better than I expected, but it's at least functional now, mostly because it's not what I used to do. And it really doesn't look any weirder than some people you've seen on TV winning titles. You don't get style points. You get the pins you knock over. And sure, I'd love to throw it like AJ Chapman or Mikey Tang, but that's not the hand that I was dealt. I mean, I have two hands and both of them suck. But anybody that plays poker knows that the values on the card doesn't mean that that's all that they're worth. Sure, sometimes you get to the end of the hand, you have to flip them over and you just don't have enough, but the values on the cards aren't all that matters. Sometimes it's your chip stack. Sometimes it's reading your opponent to see how confident they are in their card values or their chip stack. And if I just kind of sit down and say, well, my shoulder sucks and I look stupid throwing the ball, then you're not even giving yourself a chance. Sure, there's some times that you shouldn't call. There's sometimes you just fold your cards, but you go to the next hand. Done that before. And I'm definitely not going to be signing up for any PBA regionals or the TAT or anything like that. But I can still put X's on the board sometimes at regular or, local tournaments or whatever. With both hands now. So I never went super in depth on this, but in early July, I was at work. I heard a noise. I turned my head kind of weird and I felt something catch. It didn't really hurt. It was just one of those, oh crap, don't do that again kind of twinges. However, throughout the rest of the day, my neck got tighter and tighter until it was kind of locked up and didn't want to move much. I thought I'd just go home, borrow Angel's heated massage pad and try to sleep it off. That didn't really work. It loosened up a little bit, wasn't quite there. So I thought I'd give it one more day and it just wasn't letting up. Plus it had started to extend down into my shoulder too. So finally went to the chiropractor. My neck was all jacked up, of course. I had a pinched nerve. He got me loosened all up. My neck felt great after that, but my shoulder had stopped working. It didn't hurt. It wasn't numb. I just couldn't lift my arm. Hand worked, elbow worked, the shoulder was on vacation. And this happened 2 weeks before nationals. My right arm at the time was still okay. And I thought, well, I haven't used it in several years. Maybe I can at least drill something and see if I can fake it through nationals if my left shoulder doesn't wake back up. So I drilled a ball, went out to practice and discovered that my right shoulder was starting to do the same thing. So, that wasn't an option either. Angel actually had to go to nationals for me and she made more money than I would have. But over the next couple weeks, I didn't really improve. I started to get use of my left shoulder back, but it was still very weak and not in anything resembling bowling shape. Now, my right shoulder stayed dead, so I decided to go get it checked out. I got blood work, CT scan, MRI, the works. Doctor said everything looked great, and that what I likely had was the same thing that Colt McCoy had while he was at Texas. He got hit, it pinched a nerve, turned his arm into a noodle for a while. Now, I had no damage, so after getting all this stuff done, I had no damage, no issues, just the nerves weren't acting right, so my shoulders weren't working. He said could be back, could be a couple weeks, couple months, just not to force or rush it, but things would eventually wake up and I'd be back in action. However, at that point, towards the end of July, leagues were coming up. I had no idea when I'd be back or what kind of shape I'd be in when I was. So I pulled my name out of our draft league and was going to hang out until things started working again. I finally got back into functional shape about a month or two ago, mostly because I really wanted to drill. So I was okay a couple weeks before this, but I really wanted to drill the Black Widow Tour. Videos had to be done. I was still a little weak, but I made it happen. I've since gotten back to full strength. I've been taking vitamins and some supplements and stuff to help build me back up. I virtually stopped drinking. I've cleaned my diet up quite a bit. And I think I'm in even better shape now than I was before. And I have bowled a couple nights in our Friday Mix League, but I also have some other problems. So to rewind a bit, I've fought right shoulder issues ever since I dislocated my shoulder almost 20 years ago now. Anybody who's ever injured anything knows that even when you're technically back to 100% or as close as you're going to get, it still just never feels right again. I just lost the ability or the straight up function to be able to keep my elbow in and my hand behind the ball. And while I made it work for as long as I could and worked all the angles I could, it just kept wearing further and further down to the point where it was a complete mess. And I full switched to lefty. I tried a handful of times to go back righty. It never really worked. Remember, I did a right and left review for the exotic gym. That's the last time I bowled right-handed since. I did a right and left challenge match a couple years ago with Packy. That might have been the last time, but that lasted a whole 5 minutes. I think that was around the same time actually, and it just never worked out. And again, while I appreciate the thought and the concern of anyone who might want to give me suggestions, I spent years and years working, doing drills, lifting weights, whatever else. I just, like I said, do not have the physical function to throw it righty like I do lefty. I'm going to chicken wing it a little. That's just what I've got. But I'm also kind of hitting the reset button here too. So anyone that's been with me for a while remembers that I used to get on it pretty good. I do have a little video here if you want to watch. Now, I didn't necessarily shit on it, but I didn't miss it at the bottom. Let me just put it that way. Now, that's obviously not what the story is now, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Now I'm going to have an ugly version of the Tom Hess or the John Janowicz type of flip fade thing going on. And what's really interesting is the full view versus the lane view. This is exactly why you only saw the lane view when I started making videos. You see the full approach and you kind of go, I don't know. But when you just watch the ball on the lane, I've still got and have historically had a pretty sweet ball roll with both hands. Now, the ultimate question is, why am I doing this? So I've said several times, I'm just a full-time lefty now. I've tried to go back several times. I'm just going to be a full-time lefty. Has never lasted long or worked out before when I've tried to switch back. So what's different now? Why am I even messing with it? So now we have to rewind just a little bit on the lefty side. I hate bowling left-handed 75% of the time. I still have a bit of a coordination barrier, and when it comes to consistency, I can throw like 4 or 5 perfect shots and then get crossed up and throw one out the window because my coordination just takes a dump for a frame and here and there. I've still never gotten comfortable shooting 7 pins, and if I have to shoot any kind of a weird spare or baby split, especially on tougher conditions, I'm probably going to miss it. If I make a washout or a 3-6-7 or something, that's just complete dumb luck. Now, as any lefty knows, sometimes you have the look and sometimes you don't. Ball reaction is generally worse over there, and I've detailed at length exactly why this is, so I won't give you the full monologue here, but about the only time it works out is on a house shot sometimes. Longer format sweepers and double singles days at tournaments is when it's best, because if you actually have a look to start, you don't have to worry too much about transition. You can just kind of camp out and make shots. However, if you don't have a look, that also means you're not going to get any help. League sets are just short enough that it's no real benefit most of the time, unless you're in a lefty house, and bowling on tougher or sport conditions is miserable. Righties break the lanes down and eventually get something to work with, and lefties are most of the time stuck throwing urethane down the side, because as righties move in and tear up the heads, lefties obviously can't move in or that'll trap us. Burnt heads, but then fresh mids and fresh back ends isn't a recipe for success. Now, outside of that, as I've kept getting older, my hands have gotten more sensitive to temperature. When it gets cold out, my hands really shrink, and I just cannot hang on to the ball lefty. I refit myself 4 or 5 times during the 24-25 season last year, basically. I've tried rosin and tape and gamer grip and all kinds of things, and nothing worked. Besides the fact, if it was cold out, I'd be swimming and stuff, but if it was a little warmer, I wouldn't be able to get my hand in the ball. I've tried vacuum grips. I started using interchangeable thumbs, but just the way that I hold on to and throw the ball lefty makes it very difficult and borderline impossible to get my hand into the ball, hold on to it, and then have any kind of consistent release. Once again, I appreciate any thoughts and suggestions, but I have tried everything. And while I finally got something figured out to get myself in a better situation, the lifestyle changes have helped keep my hand from fluctuating so much as well. But I think that anyone that's older knows you lose some muscle mass, your skin starts changing. There's just extra challenges that make it more difficult. So the other problem that's really driving this is that I've always kind of had brittle hair and nails. I kind of run dehydrated most of the time. My mom has the same thing, and the way I throw the ball lefty puts a lot of torque on my middle finger. I basically don't even use my ring finger. It's just kind of in the ball to be there, but I really flex my middle fingernail a lot. And over the last year and a half, it started growing in with bubbles in it. These bubbles are weak points, and at a tournament earlier this year, I had it break horizontally right down the middle of the nail. I got some pictures. We'll be hitting the screen, and trigger warning if you're easily grossed out. It hurt like shit. I was bleeding everywhere. The tip of the nail was still live and connected, so I just couldn't just clip it off or rip it off and tape myself up. I had to glue the shit out of it and make it through the day. Again, I've worked a lot with fit, and I tried to take some pressure off. I've added some reverse pitch, just again, several different things. But it's just the way that I throw the ball. So even if I tape it up or glue it or whatever, it's still going to grow in dumb. It's still going to break. It's still going to hurt. And every time that happens, my finger swells up, so on and so forth. So I just get my shoulders working again, shoot a couple ball videos, bowl a couple league sets, and now my nail has grown in stupid once again. It tore up by the cuticle. I had to clip it down so I wouldn't catch it on anything or rip it off. That hurt like hell. And now I basically have exposed nail bed under it. I'm bowling Greater Tulsa Open Thanksgiving weekend. I'm not sure if it's going to be grown out in time, and I'm just kind of over it. I don't have these problems righty. Even if my hand does shrink or swell, I've always been able to handle that better righty than lefty because of the way I throw the ball. My finger sizes, everything doesn't have to be so precise like it does lefty. Plus, I've got drilling tricks for my fingers, and then I've already got all kitted out for interchangeables. Plus, righty, I share the load more evenly between my middle and ring finger. I've never had issues with my hand whatsoever on the right side. So I still had that ball that I drilled right-handed in July when I was going to try to bowl nationals right-handed. And so I thought, okay, well, why not give it a shot again? But I'm going to try something different. When I tried to go back before, I'd always tried to go back to what I'd done or what I used to be. Now I've done that enough to know that that's not an option. But I thought, what if I just turn into an up 10 dumper and give it a soft float? And after a bit of awkward trial and error, this is where I'm at. Now, at this point, I'm not trying to rip the cover off the ball. I'm not trying to be uber competitive. I'm just trying to be able to use my right hand somewhat effectively to bowl. Even if I was trying to be competitive, I'm actually I'm looking at senior bowling before not too long. The Tom Sioux up in Nebraska, for example, it's an over-under tournament. People are always looking for decent old guys, and you only have to be 45 to be the old guy on the team. I'm going to be 45 next year, so before the tournament. And if I'm bowling other old guys later in after 50 in senior events, I'm not going to be bowling two-handers and 500 rev rates for the most part. Tom Hess and John Janowicz are destroying the PBA 50 regular stops and regionals, and they have pretty simple games where they just put the ball out onto the lane and let it roll, just like I'm doing now. So it's still going to look a little weird, but I think I can tighten this up, and some of these shots are still pretty damn good. If I can throw these kinds of shots with any kind of consistency, I'm going to be in good shape for a lot of different things. I used to slide righty too, but I've liked planning so much lefty that if you've noticed, I'm now planning righty too. I never have to worry about approaches again. It also keeps me slow and in time. And since my rev rate isn't 450 anymore, I don't really need to worry about throwing the ball that hard. Plus, when the lanes start drying up or the heads blow up, I've got this nice soft float now that gets through the fronts and then reads the lane when I want it to. All in all, I think I could end up being in the best game shape I've almost ever been in. However, this doesn't mean that I want to give up bowling lefty. There's still a few tournaments and situations it's really beneficial in. Now, I really want to bowl Tulsa lefty if at all possible, because it is miserable when it starts breaking down on the right because it's very cliffy. The heads start out really dry to begin with. So if you can stay straighter and beat the pocket to death, you're going to be in good shape. When you have to start moving inside, it turns into a nightmare because if you get it a little right too quick, it turns sideways. But if you miss in a little, it never hooks. It just sails, never wrinkles. Now on the left, you don't have the transition to worry about, so you can stay straighter with your angles. Southwest and Wichita is just wide open either way, but it can kind of get rough on the right depending on who you're bowling with, crossing with, and the same kind of deal Same kind of deal with Tulsa on the left. It lets you stay pretty straight with your angles, and the pins there love rounder, lazier ball shapes, which I'm really good at. And I've historically had better luck at Southwest lefty than I ever did righty. On the flip side, I don't really enjoy bowling the draft league lefty. It's okay, but I'd prefer to be a captain and draft my team every year if at all possible. I'm always right on that line lefty, and I'm a pretty weak captain even when I do make it. Plus, with all the aforementioned issues, sometimes I show up in, December, January, whatever, and I just can't hang on to the ball and have to wait until my hand warms up. Or now I'll have to take a few weeks off every time my nail grows in stupid. And there's a rule in that league that prevents people from taking their average too many weeks in a row. And it's really difficult finding subs because everybody that you'd want to sub is already bowling the league. There's also some balls for videos that just do not match up for me lefty, and I know that going in. The Zero Mercy Solid, it definitely not a lefty ball, and Angel didn't want it. I've ended up drilling several balls for her in videos that she didn't want and didn't use after the video just because I knew it wasn't something that was going to be throwable for me. I need rounder, more continuous shapes on the left, so it's no surprise that stuff like the Alert, Black Widow Mania, the Tour V1, Stealth Mode, Black Dragon Pearl, so on and so forth, all look good for me, but balls like the Pure Envy, Hazmat Solid, Phase 2, Maximum Effect, Hammer Effect, and even something like the Evoke Hysteria still didn't end up looking that great or really working out. Now on the right, I still prefer the rounder, more continuous shapes, but I can also make great use of balls that I suck with lefty. I have more touch righty and can control my shapes better, so something like the Zero Mercy Solid that never would have gotten thrown lefty will definitely get some use righty once I use a gallon of polish. But phase 2 was a god ball for me righty, and all it did was hook puke for me lefty. I've got an overseas phase 3 SE in the basement that I got when I was right-handed, but once I switched and saw how wretched every phase but the 5 looked for me lefty, it's just sat in the box. The phase 3 also, I really love that ball righty. It was just a puke machine lefty. So all that stuff that I just mentioned, Pure Envy, Max Effect, Hysteria, that would all look great for me and be very useful righty. So to my lefty fans, I'm not abandoning you. I'm not full switching. I think there's going to be times that I'm going to take both a lefty and righty arsenal to a tournament, bowl the sweeper the night before, and then decide which hand I'm going to bowl with when I show up on Saturday. Dutchman in Pennsylvania, so dry that I fought it the whole time lefty, but I can chase it as far left as I need to righty, so no worries there. Nationals, my God, am I done bowling Nationals lefty? I actually cashed a decent amount lefty, but when it was rough, it was ultra rough. I'm just never doing that again, especially now that I can't use the Perp Daddy. And, when I see stuff like Matt McNeil going 550, 470 last year in team and doubles, obviously I don't have a chance there. I think I'm going to sprinkle Trevor in here or there too. Remember, I had him for the Theorem Solid and Combat reviews, so I'm not just going to never bowl or never make lefty reviews again. It's just become enough of a sustained problem for one reason or another that I just don't think I'm going to be able to bowl full time with either hand. I think it's going to be like righty for the draft league, lefty for the mixed league, half and half on the videos, kind of whichever hand I think the ball will look best for, and then whichever hand will look best at whatever tournament. I was getting really burnout bowling lefty too because it felt too much like gambling outside of whatever issues I may be having. You show up and it's either a competitive look or it's not. You can make some adjustments and play around, but if the right side starts the same and then opens up, there's no such thing as just throw it better. If you have 2 boards to aim at and everybody else on the other side has 4, this is why everybody complains about the lefty wall. It's like, well, the lefties just have the world and I can't compete with that. But as soon as the lefties don't have anything, it's like, we just need to throw it better. Aside from that is if I walk into the building lefty, as I so often do around here, and Packy's there and Spencer's there and Trevor's there, I'm automatically bowling for 4th out of just the lefties at best, let alone Zach Wilkins and Ryan Barnes and TJ Rock and the rest of Wichita State, and then the rest of the local hot shots, not to mention on the right side. At least if I show up righty and the left sucks, I've got something to work with and I can maybe steal a high game pot or something. So anyway, it's been rough. It hasn't been a lot of fun, and I'm just doing everything that I can to make it work. Maybe this is my big second chance, and all the nonsense has actually resulted in me getting to a relatively nice place that's better than where I would have been otherwise. I literally have paid for it in blood, but it's nice to know that through all the issues in the work and the sacrifice and everything else for the last couple decades, that I can at least walk downstairs and grab 6 balls off the shelf and then walk back up to my full pro shop in the garage and make something happen. I have been staring at a lot of balls for a long time that I wanted to drill, but knew would just be a waste to do it lefty. So now I've got a chance to do that. But anyway, that's the story. Thanks for watching, and may the strikes be with you.